Hello and welcome to another session of Cop Talk, Two Jews, Muse on the News. I am Bob Cohn, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus, and with me is Larry Levin, our esteemed publisher and CEO, as well as Mike Sherwin, our Managing Editor and Program Producer. Lots to talk about, Larry, so let's get right to it. This week, defensive end Michael Sam, University of Missouri's first All-American in 50 years, made national news by coming out as gay even as he is in training for the NFL draft. Of course that is newsworthy, but why should we as Jews be especially not only for Sam's courage, enthusiastic, but also for how his Mizzou team in the NFL have reacted to this announcement?
Well, as you and I have discussed a lot, anytime you see, great persecution of a minority, where a minority is disadvantaged because of their status, because of their orientation in this case, it's just awful, and it's incredibly brave to take a stance like Michael Sam has done. When you think about it, let's say Michael Sam would have been a third-round draft pick or a fourth-round draft pick. What if he's now a no-round draft pick? All of a sudden, the present value of his lifetime earnings might have been diminished by several $million, at least. And so, for him to take the stance now, he's really saying to the league and to the world, take me on my own basically ground and who I am for who I am. What do you think?
Well, I think, the first is always the first, first openly gay NFL player. He's going to be in the NFL, I'm sure, at some point.
Let's hope.
But then let's do hope, because it would be a tremendous travesty after he's demonstrated this degree of courage and got the backing of his teammates, the coach, the university, and the NFL's officialdom for them to not do the right thing in terms of his career. But, Jackie Robinson had to face this. Hank Greenberg, when he was a Jewish superstar, chasing after Babe Ruth's record,
absolutely.
Got all kinds of taunts from the stands. And I heard on NPR an interesting discussion that we don't need to make a hierarchy of who suffered the most.
No.
Discrimination is discrimination is discrimination.
Right.
And, we had the lynching of Matthew Shepard, we have the lynching of Leo Frank. So
and even pro civil rights groups can fall into that trap.
No question.
And say my issue is more important. My issue is more important. And like you say, it's important to rally behind anybody who represents a group that's been stigmatized.
And on the other side of this is the remarkable, within 3 to 5 years, the tremendous turnaround in court decisions, legislatures, the ruling yesterday that federal benefits will be given to all same-sex couples, regardless of whether the state in which they reside has legalized same-sex marriages.
Yeah, and now, now a group is challenging Missouri's law. And I saw now a group is challenging, I believe, New Mexico's law, and so, and other laws. So I think we're gonna see them fall like dominoes. I think there are some factions in Jefferson City who are upset with the governor's support in favor of, granting couples tax status to those who have been recognized with their same-sex marriages in other states, but I think he's definitely taken the right position.
And I think one of the benefits of the emergence of a libertarian wing within the Republican Party, some of them are Tea Party folks, but others overlap with conventional liberals on the issue of civil liberties.
Well, theoretically, we'll see. You are right. You are right from a philosophic and theoretical perspective. We'll see how much of that plays out in the court of public opinion.
Maybe a tad more hope than you are, and maybe you're being more realistic. Now, the timing of Michael Sam's historic announcement came at an especially opportune time during the Sochi Winter Olympics against the backdrop of Russia's law against so-called pro-gay propaganda and Nigeria's insistence that it's going to cleanse. That's another term that was used against the Jews. We're going to make the country Judenrein, clean of Jews.
Yeah, and Uganda has been, supportive of killing, those who are, who express who commit homosexual acts. So
exactly.
Yeah, in several African countries. Yeah. So anyway, I interrupted your question. What was your question?
Well, I think I just was commenting more than a question on the timeliness of this Michael Sam announcement. And the fact, it makes me very thankful to be in America when other countries around the world, including Russia, which is, after all, a sophisticated nation state, would actually pass a law like that and use street hooligans to beat up on gays and lesbians.
It's amazing. I think the international community was concerned about events happening during the Olympics. I think Putin is far more interested in the glamour of the Olympics than he is of arresting, gays from other countries. I think a lot of people are worried about the persecution against the Russian gay community in the aftermath of the Olympics. And I think that's scary and something to watch.
It is, and I kind of grudgingly feel good for him because this was such a huge deal for him personally. And he's got a gold medal in the Supreme Ego trip of a lifetime.
Yeah, I do have to say though, if I can jump in about the Olympics, in the opening ceremonies at least on the United States telecast, it was a very heavy-handed political kind of commentary by the editor of the New Yorker, if I remember right. It was a little bothersome to me. Not that I didn't agree with some of the characterizations of Putin, and his thumbscrew politics, but come on, I mean, every country has its history that it doesn't want to, disclose in full regalia at an opening ceremony. I dare say I don't think an American opening ceremony would be about how sorry we are about the way we treated Native Americans, or about 200 years of slavery, right? So I thought it was a little hard-headed and overreaching the way that NBC treated it.
I agree with you. And that was the editor of the New Yorker.
The editor of the New Yorker,
guy, but he's part of what used to be called the effete core of Indian Islam.
I think we saw
a little bit ultra elitist. I had the same exact
Yeah.
reaction. The Middle East is still aflame and getting worse by the day, not only in terms of civil war and terrorism, but over the inflammatory political rhetoric. The Orthodox, Rabbinical Council of America and the Orthodox Union have condemned the venom of some Israeli officials' attacks on Secretary of State John Kerry's efforts to achieve a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. I don't recall, I mean, the Orthodox community is usually in the corner of the so-called hardliners, but they joined the chorus of condemnation. And I have my own reservations about some of the language that Kerry may have used in Geneva, for example. But to question his integrity and his support of Israel over the decades is really...
Look, you and I have talked about this, and I know we come from a little bit different perspective. But this is a guy who, at this point in his career, he's rich as sin.
Right.
He doesn't have to be doing anything. He's shuttling back and forth between the United States and the Middle East on an average about every other week. He's invested his lifeblood in this. He doesn't have to be doing any of it, and it's likely to fail.
Exactly.
So this is a guy who, as we pointed out, in our editorial 2 weeks ago, voted consistently and affirmatively in favor of almost everything Israel for over 2 decades in the Senate. And so some people laid at his feet that he said if there's not a deal, there are going to be more boycotts. He says, I was telling you my opinion. I think if there's not a deal, there's probably going to be more boycotts. And you know what? I probably agree with them. Was it savvy to say it? Maybe not. Right. I don't think there was anything about it that was anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, or leaning in favor of, a grossly Palestinian position.
And I am rooting for the success of this arrangement. He has devoted more intense personal time and political capital. He doesn't seem to have any more presidential ambitions, although if he's successful, I don't think that would be a far-fetched suggestion for the future.
And I think with Bibi, we're going to, I think it's interesting now to watch what's going to happen with Bibi. Is he going to try and find a different political constituency to support him? As the right in Israel pushes further to the right, and away from, trying to do something, constructive, or even the appearance of something constructive, in terms of those talks and in terms of diplomacy, is Bibi going to try and track down something that looks more like his long ago right-center coalition?
One of the critics said of another politician, he has all the principles of a seismograph, and Bibi is more of a pragmatic survivor.
No, he is.
And there's the precedent of the Wye River Accords, where he gave up a lot to get the agreement on Hebron. And I think he craves staying in power, and he's going to reinvent himself.
Yeah, and what happens if it looks like they are going to get a deal, and Sippy's been in the middle of it,
Exactly.
Now she looks like a heroine,
Precisely.
he's got to start grabbing the spotlight again.
No question about it.
Right.
So it'll be a very interesting dynamic to see. The good news is that of all the turmoil throughout the Middle East, I mean, there have been some rocket incidents, and I'm not saying it's a totally quiet border, but in comparison to what's happening in Syria, and there's a good segue into that, the New York Times is not a hawkish newspaper by any means, but they published an op-ed in yesterday's edition, Use Force to Save Starving Syrians. Mm-hmm. We were at least cautiously hopeful about the so-called peace talks in Geneva that don't seem to be going anywhere. There were conflicting reports that the UN and the Red Crescent, their Red Cross, had rescued up to 300 people. Now there are reports that the regime, Bashar Assad, has taken some of the people rescued into custody. And it doesn't seem to they're tardy on the removal of their chemical weapons. Maybe it is time to re-engage with NATO and with a coalition of the willing to take enough forceful action to at least stop the bloodshed. What do you think?
I think something has to be done beyond what's been done so far, and I don't know if that something is the United States taking more aggressive steps or not. The United States in a very tough place. They're trying to deal with Iran on one stage, with Israel Palestine on the second stage, and then to be expected to be the leader on Syria. I don't know, like you said, NATO or someone is going to have to be at least an equal partner in taking that lead. But certainly at this point, the bloodshed is beyond crazy.
It really is. You provided me with a segue into a question about Iran. Yesterday was the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. We had the usual suspects in the street shouting death to America, even as Hassan Rouhani gave a relatively moderate speech. What are we to make of all that? Whose signal should we listen to?
Well, first we have to remember that the original revolution helped make Ted Koppel's career. Because who among us of a certain age were watching Nightline every single night as that tragedy unfolded? So it's quite amazing. I don't know. I've been supportive of the efforts that the group of however many.
P5 plus
P5, right, have engaged in. I'm still hopeful, actually. I mean, I think we just saw that Iran has struck a deal with the International Atomic Energy Commission to have them look at some sites beyond what they've looked at before. IAEA. And so I'm hopeful about that. I don't know that anything will unfold in the 6 months that was intended. I wish it would, because we'll get closer to the 2014 midterm elections, and it may end up being an issue there, which I wish it wouldn't. But I guess I'm still, and you know me, I'm always mildly optimistic about this stuff, but I still think something can be done, because I feel like the Iran politically feels that the hurt economically, whether or not Congress acts, that the hurt economically is worse than playing along, at least to some extent at this point. So.
And I should correct myself, it's P5 plus 1.
Plus 1,
one being Germany,
that's right, yeah.
The other 5 being the permanent members of the
UN.
United Nations Security. We need to remind ourselves not to always use initials and
that's right.
encrypted language. Now, we also have had in Poland and other European countries, there have been bans on ritual slaughter for preparing kosher meat, attempts to ban the ritual circumcision, which affects Jews and Muslims. Is there any kernel of legitimacy to these efforts, or is it just thinly disguised anti-Semitism?
I think in that case it's pretty much anti-Semitism and anti-minority, because of course there are Muslim practices too about eating and dietary laws. But no, I don't see so. We've seen actions in this country on circumcision, city of San Francisco,
right, exactly.
which quite frankly have been, I think, disgusting. They have not dredged up any strong scientific historical data or evidence suggesting that people are harmed long term by these practices, or that people should be banned from practicing their own particular religious historical practices or cultural practices. So no, I mean, I think it is more than thinly veiled. I think it's thickly or non-veiled kind of discrimination toward minorities. What do you think?
I think it is absolutely a blatant kind of discrimination under the disguise of being legitimately concerned. The overwhelming preponderance of scientific research into circumcision is that it has a more positive than negative effect.
Yeah.
And certainly not a harmful effect.
Well, that's exactly right. And we thought, at least for a long time, there was scientific data about the prevention of STDs,
right.
or at least the reduction of the number of cases of STDs, but there certainly isn't any evidence of long-term harm to those who have had circumcision. So.
Yeah, and we're almost out of time for this session, but we should take note of the pending retirement of Abraham H. Foxman, Abe Foxman, the national leader of the Anti-Defamation League. That really signals the end of an era in veteran national Jewish leadership.
50 years, and we've had him in this very room.
Yeah,
you've interviewed him many occasions. We've interviewed him on video here. It's probably in the Light Archives somewhere, so feel free to look for those online. Yeah, it really is, and I'm sure we'll have more occasion to talk about that. And the final thing I want to say is I'm wearing a red cap today because pitchers and catchers report. Go Cardinals, it's almost there. We survived the winter.
Very good. Thank you, Larry Levin. Thank you, Mike Sherwin, and thanks to our viewers.
Thanks.